Hello everyone, my name is Ross the Alcheminiaturist, and today we're building Turnip28 Lopers. Now, you may be asking yourself, or more specifically me, what's a Loper? Well, to quote the Turnip28 rulebook, Lopers are stilt walkers of the maudlin marsh, pitiful drunks. They stride into battle, tottering this way and that. Well, that's all well and good. How do we build them? For starters, I took my very old, and still on sprue, Empire greatswords. They have this lovely rank and file look to them that just screams, do something to us. Don't let us continue to go to waste like we have been. And I mean, who am I to say no to such a lovely request like that? I clipped the greatsword's legs and torsos, but only 4, because Lopers, as a unit, only have 4 models in them. And while I could have had 2 units of them, currently I only want 1. Once the bodies and legs were clipped, and I had cleaned off the excess trim and any mold lines that they had, I used plastic cement to glue them together before taking the whole bodies and affixing them to their bases with blue tack. I used 32mm bases. For Lopers, you can use any bases sized between 20 and 40mm. But I wanted to have some base real estate, so I chose a larger option. Once they were affixed securely, I took my Turnip28 3D printed bits and grabbed some heads, arms, both open-handed and holding a rifle, and an arm mutation. I wanted to be able to show that these Lopers may have been out in the field for a while and eating even more less than desirable meals, and it had some adverse effects to at least one of them. I glued these pieces on with a mixture of superglue and baking soda that was stolen from the pantry, and now I owe the pantry a new box of baking soda. I left the bodies to cure together for a bit and grabbed some Q-tips. I took 8 Q-tips and cut the cotton off the tops and bottoms to just leave the wooden part. Q-tips are the perfect size compared to the size of the model, to be accurate stilts for them. Again, I used superglue on the wood, dipped them into the baking soda, and then used more glue and affixed them to the outside of each of the Loper's legs. Voila! Most of the stilts are done. Next, it was time to work on the bases. Like I said before, I had an idea of what I wanted to do with the real estate on the bases. I grabbed my cork and ripped off small chunks to glue to the base to add some extra height, as well as more dimension to the base. I love cork. The material, not the city. I've never been to the city, so I can't really comment on it. Cork is, in my opinion, one of the best basing materials we have as a hobby community. It can be used quickly and easily to make many different basing details. Once the cork was glued on, I drilled/cut small holes into them to sort of slot at least one of the Loper's stilts in to give them a little bit of extra stability. Cork itself is a pretty absorbent material and as such sucks superglue up very quickly. So I had to work quickly to get the stilt into the hole once I put the superglue on. Once the stilts were in the cork, I took out my gamer's grass and put some on each of the bases as well as on the Lopers themselves to give them a little, how do you say it, je ne sais quoi? These ones are a little old, and as such, the adhesive isn't the best. So I always make sure to just dab a little glue onto them to help them out. It's not like it'll do any damage to it. And then it was on to painting. I fired up my airbrush and quickly primed them all with a gray mixture that comprised of Vellejo's white primer and AK's black primer. As a tip, make sure you look at the model at every angle, including on top and from underneath, to make sure that you haven't missed anything in your priming spree. First on the painting list were the pants. For them, I used Akryl's Sky Blue, as I have for a couple of my other Turnip28 models. I made sure not to paint their boots, as I wanted these guys to be wearing metal boots while they were up on stilts. They're tall, not smart. For the mutated Loper, I then took Akryl's bold Pyrolle red to give him a more distinct spot in the group. I mean, who's not gonna see a guy with a dirty great big red hat? Next, I grabbed what is probably my most used paint, Citadel's Leadbeltcher, to paint their boots, armor, and guns, as well as swords on their backpacks. Once the metal was all painted and ready, I went on to the fabric that was remaining on their arms. For this, I used Army Painter's Alien Purple for its richness and semi-complementary color to the blue pants. Up next were their backpacks. I wanted them to feel the most military-like of the entire ensemble, so I painted them with Vellejo's Mutation green. I made sure to miss the boots and other accessories on the backpacks, because honestly, who has green-soled shoes? Grabbing Citadel's Moot green, I then applied it to the Mutation to give it a stark and more bright, infected look to it. In order to let the models have a couple minutes more to dry, I took Vellejo's medium sea gray, mixed it with water in a 1 part water, 3 parts paint, and painted the bases with it. The more liquid paint covered the cork and base nicely, and left a little of the darker gray as shading in some of the more jagged areas of the base. Since I had not covered up the stilts, and I promise that was on purpose, I then took Vellejo's beastly brown and painted the stilts and guns back to more of their woody brown glory. Right after, I took a much smaller brush and some of Vellejo's parasite brown and made little streaks on the stilts to help simulate wood grain. Up next, the hands. Using Citadel's Rakarth flesh, I quickly painted over the hands, careful not to put too much paint on them, so that, again, some of the dark gray primer would help with more shadowed areas. As the Lopers are from the Maudlin Marsh, I wanted to try and simulate a little of that, so I went over the gray of the base with a quick sloshing of Citadel's Nazdreg yellow contrast paint. Once that was all done, it came to probably my favorite part of any Turnip28 painting, the slathering of AK's streaking grime. Unless it was the base, the whole of the models got a healthy slosh of streaking grime on it. Did I ever tell you that I had a friend once tell me that it was his favorite tasting paint? No? Yes? I can't remember. Let me know if you've heard that already before. I left the Lopers for about 15 minutes for the streaking grime to cure, and then took out my mineral spirits and Q-tips to pull off some of the said streaking grime. In my opinion, you don't want your entire model to look that grimy. Not many things are that grimy in real life, fully, so if you pull some off, especially making sure to bring some luster back to some of the metal parts, it makes the model look more like they were actually doing something other than just standing in the muck. Also, word to the wise, use a garbage brush that you don't like or a cheap one for this part, as if you do what I did, you will find that the Q-tips will leave some strands on the model, and you won't notice until after you're done and taking beauty shots of them. Last but not least was finishing the bases. First, I took some of Vellejo's brown mud Diorama FX paste and added it to the top of the cork parts of the base. After that, I used some of AK's swamp green water gel and put that on the flat parts of the base so that it completed the look that the Lopers were walking through the swamps. After 24 hours of setting, the swamp water was done, and so are these models. If you got this far, please consider liking the video and subscribing. I would really appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.